Would be opening your Bibles to Ecclesiastes chapter 5. Ecclesiastes chapter 5. We'll pick up where we left off a few weeks ago. I normally don't take time to make comments at the beginning and just want to get into the lesson because this is God's time and not mine. I do want to say thank you to all those fellas that stepped up and taught, though. We are blessed here, aren't we? We have some talented folks. I think that Greg and Mr. John and all of our teachers on Wednesday nights did a wonderful job. And we have a lot more than just those fellas that can teach and preach. And we are to be grateful and should be thankful to God for that wonderful blessing. I know that I am. Ecclesiastes chapter 5, and where the first part of the chapter we discussed a few weeks ago, we talked about the attitude and the type of language, or actually the way we speak when we approach God in worship. And Solomon went through the idea of one who's going to be wise and the fool who comes and makes a vow before God and doesn't fulfill that vow. And he changes gears on us now, and we get to verse 10 of chapter 5, and he's going to talk to us about something that it hits every one of us, really. We either have had a problem with it or struggle with it, we are having a problem or struggle with it, or we will have a problem or struggle with it, and that is the aspect of money, riches, wealth, as he talks about here in this passage. And so Solomon, of course, we could consider him as one of those who we would say is ultra wealthy or was mega wealthy. You go back, and if you ever want to read about Solomon's wealth, 1 Kings chapter 3 through chapter 10, 7 chapters that really discuss the wealth of Solomon. It's not really anything that I can relate to or fathom, and but he's extremely wealthy. Even here in this book, in the book of Ecclesiastes, you recall back in chapter 2, verses 4 through 8, he talked about how he enlarged his kingdom out, how he amassed houses and gold and things like that. And while we may not fall in the category of being ultra wealthy the way Solomon is, one thing we can say is for certainty, if we're a U.S. citizen, we do fall in the category on the world stage, if you will, of being rich. If you've got running water in your house, you're in the top few percent of people in the world. And if you have indoor plumbing, things that we just take for granted. The light switch on the wall that actually, when you hit it, lights come on. We're really rich when thinking about things on the world stage. That's not really the point here, though. The point, whether you have a lot of money in your bank account or your bank account has just a few dollars in it, that's not really the point of what Solomon wants to get across to us here. What he's going to get across to us is, what is our attitude about money? What are our thoughts and our attitude about money? And no matter the number in our bank account, the attitude that we have toward money is either going to make us miserable, right, unhappy, angry, dissatisfied with life, or it's going to bring us, we're going to be at peace with it. And so what does Solomon have to say about money? Now, we could make this into a sermon that could last for several weeks, but we're not going to do that. We're going to hit some high points here. I'm going to write about it a little bit more from chapter 6 tomorrow for Tuesday's article. But let's hit the high points about money this morning. And so when we think about money, first of all, we need to understand this, that money's never going to be able to provide you with any type of true satisfaction. Notice what he says in verse 10. He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves abundance with his income. This too is vanity. And so he's speaking about the person who loves money. Now, we know Paul talks about this later on, 1,500, 2,000 years later, after Solomon writes this, 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 10, the love of money is the root of all sorts of evil. Notice what he says, and some, by longing for it, have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. You ever know anybody that was chasing the dollar so much? And it's an eternal chase that can never really be ended, isn't it? I watched a TEDx talk yesterday on YouTube. What's the lady's name? Nicole Curtis. She does rehabs on HGTV. I like building shows. But she was talking about how when she started, she just did it because she enjoyed doing houses. But as time went on, she got to where she was chasing the dollars. And as she chased more dollars, she became more miserable and unhappy just going after the dollars, and forgot the reason that she had started what she was doing, because she enjoyed working on houses. And so it's interesting that even from a secular perspective, someone who's not looking at what Solomon has to say, the inspired directions from God, that even from a secular standpoint, they realize chasing the dollar is not the answer. It's not going to bring you satisfaction at all. In fact, Paul goes on to say, in 1 Timothy 6, verse 17, he says, instruct those who are rich. Now, these are brethren, right? He's in Ephesus. There are some brethren in Ephesus that are rich. And he says, instruct those who are rich in this present world not to be conceited or to fix their hope on the uncertainty of riches. And so there are a lot of brethren that are wealthy and rich. And we're going to see in a minute who gave the wealth. But he says they're rich in this present world. And that's an allusion to the fact that that's not going with you later on. We're going to talk about that as well. They're rich in this present world. Make sure you don't fix your hope in the bottom line. Now, let me ask you, are you guilty of that sometimes? Have you ever been guilty of looking at the bottom line and saying, life's not looking too good right now, and I'm a little bit nervous and I'm a little bit scared because the bottom line isn't there, and whether I wanted to or not, maybe I put my hope in that. You've been there before? I have. Yeah. Paul says don't do that. And he's warning those who are rich, don't do that. Because your bank account is fat, right? And it's overflowing. Don't fix your hope there. It's not going to provide you with what you need. In fact, he says, don't fix your hope on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly supplies us with all things to enjoy. Well, when we love money and we're chasing after money, we understand it's never going to be able to satisfy us. Never at all. In fact, you remember back in chapter 3, verse 11, where Solomon says that God has set eternity in our hearts, right? And so as we go through this life looking for something that will fulfill that desire for something greater, stuffing money in that hole, it just isn't going to do us any good whatsoever. And you could apply that to anything, right? But in the context, we're talking about money and wealth. And if we're looking for meaning and real, true satisfaction, it ain't going to be in the love of money. Next, we understand this about money, that when you get a lot of money, sometimes you find out that you have more friends than you actually realize, right? Yeah. What does he say in verse 11? When good things increase, those who consume them increase. So what advantage to their owners except to look on? Do you know anyone that is that's really wealthy? I've got some friends, through raising money for mission works and traveling across the country. I've come across some people who are very wealthy and have become good friends with them. And I've been with them when they receive a text or a phone call from some random person and they're asking for money, right? When the money comes on the scene, more people come on the scene to try to get it. We know it's really somewhat cliche, I would think. You've seen the stories on the news about the person who wins the lottery, right? They have this big influx of money, and where they were pretty much unnoticed on the world stage their whole life, all of a sudden, you're my good friend. And or we're running DNA tests because I think we're related, or you know, you know what I'm saying? And so a year later they go back to these people who had this big thing of money, and they're broke and they're miserable, and they're saying, I wish we would have never won it. And that's exactly what we've got here. The money's come in, and in the end, everyone's got their hands so much in it that all I can do is just sit there and watch it go away. You know, I got a taste of this a little bit when we lived in Africa. In Africa, when I went over there, I was one of these people who was very wealthy because I'm an American in a third world country. Now, I know that I'm living on support and raising money and things are really tight, but let's face it, in a third world country, I'm rich, really rich, okay? Word spreads really fast that there's an American moving into the community. In fact, the Tanzanians have a saying, when a new person walks by or someone walks by that's from outside of the country, European, American, what have you, let's face it, someone who's white, okay, because I'm in a country where most people are black. They have a saying, there goes the deal. That's the saying. And so all of a sudden, people are following. They know where you live. There's no secrets in Africa. They know where you live. And so every day on my gate, knock, knock, knock. Oh, mister, please, I need money for this, this, and this. Maybe all legitimate. But here's the thing that I'm trying to get across. I got a taste of what it would be like to be someone sort of like this. And let me tell you, I feel for people. I feel for people. Not that I wouldn't want the big bank account. But I feel for people that have to put up with that their whole life. Right? And sometimes when they have the ultra wealthy, it's always going to be someone asking for money, someone taking money, and you sit back and eventually sometimes you just say, go at it. I read a story this last week in the news, something or other about a 94-year-old woman down in Florida. She's obviously very rich, but she sued her grandsons because her grandsons were managing her vast wealth and they were taking her money. And they were charging up fees because, after all, Grandma has plenty of it. And so why not pad our bank accounts? They'd taken her for into the tens of millions of dollars. So she said, instead of sitting back and letting them do this, I'm going to sue you. And so she sued her grandsons. Can you imagine? Anyway, the point is this. When the wealth comes on the scene in big pieces, a lot of times the friends increase. And it's not everything it's cracked up to be. And it brings about a lot of strain and stress. In fact, notice what he says, if you will, when we go to the next Bible turned on me, it's verse 12. For the money lover here, who's everyone wants their hands in it, we find in verse 12 that the sleep of the working man is pleasant, whether he eats little or much. But the full stomach of the rich man doesn't allow him to sleep. Boy, isn't that just a whopping statement in a few words? You have the man that goes to work, puts in a hard day's work. He gets home, he's tired, and he's able to eat. God's provided for him, but the meal may not be big, or it may be big, but it doesn't matter. The point is this: he's put in a hard day's work. When the day's over, he doesn't have any problem going to bed. He's not worried about these things. But notice that the rich man, notice here, he has a full stomach. That's an interesting couple words, really. We might say he's fat, you know. That is that he's eaten himself to the point to where he doesn't want to eat anymore. Your Bible may actually have a footnote in it where it has the word satiety, right? Isn't that interesting? It's the word from satisfaction that you find back in verse 10, okay? So while he might be physically full, guess what? He goes to bed and he's not able to sleep at all. His mind is reeling with his money problems and his issues, and we're going to see in a minute how to take care of it all. And he hasn't been working hard like the other man has been working. He's sort of worried about watching his money. And so he may have a full stomach, but when he goes to bed, he sure can't sleep. And he tosses and turns over all of it. In fact, you get to verse 13. Notice what Solomon says. Now, this is a new paragraph, but it continues the idea. There's a grievous evil which I have seen under the sun, riches being hoarded by their owner to his hurt. So, what's he saying? This man has a full stomach, he goes to bed, and he can't sleep. And he's trying to consider how he can hoard his money, hold on to his money, not lose anything, right? This word hoarded, it's an interesting word as well. It's used in other parts of the Old Testament, and it's usually used in a positive sense. Saving some money for a rainy day. That's what we have passed down in our culture, right? We want to save. There comes a time we do want to not have to be able to go to work, and we want to retire, and we want to have money to be able to live until we pass from this life. So you save some money, right? And so usually used in a positive sense, but here it's not used in a positive sense. Notice that it's being hoarded and shoved away to his hurt. All this man can think about, this lover, this money lover, all he can think about is how can I hold on to this, and how can I make it bigger, and how can I make sure I'm not giving any of it away, right? Oh, he's a miserable fella. He can't sleep at all. And so it consumes his life as he tries to figure out how he can hold on to it, how he can make more. And so what does he do in this state? Well, we learn something else about money in the next verse, right? This man who can't sleep and he's trying to hoard it. Solomon says, when those riches were lost through a bad investment, and he'd fathered a son, then there was nothing to support him. You know what money has? Money has wings, doesn't it? That stuff can fly away, and it can leave very quickly. Now, here it says a bad investment. The actual language is an evil task, right? And so how might we bring that into today's language? Well, have you ever known of anyone to take all their paychecks and run to the casino? Right? I just know this time I'm going to win the big one. And then the whole paycheck's gone, and the whole bank account's empty. The house has been mortgaged as many times as it can be, and now who's paying for it? Not only has he lost whatever money he may have had, but he can't take care of his family. You see here, he lost it all in this evil task, and he's got a son to take care of. He can't provide for him now. You've seen stories, right? And I know that we have a lot of elderly folks here, and I hope it doesn't happen to you, but you've seen many people where we need money, or we've got the opportunity of a lifetime for you to invest in. And empty bank accounts, and it's a scam. And you're never getting that money back, right? Bad investment. Left them wanting. And so this man has, in trying to keep it all, he's put all of his faith into it, and he's dumped it all into this evil task, and he finds out very quickly that he's absolutely broke, and he can't take care of it. Well, we come to realize this thing about money as well from verse 15. And that is this. Say you survive and you get to the end with all of the money. Great. What Solomon makes clear is that for this man who's lost everything, he says, as he come naked from his mother's womb, so he will return as he came. He will take nothing from the fruit of his labor that he can carry. Look at the last phrase, in his hand. Okay? This is a reference to this life, okay, and how we live in this life. And so this man who loves money and has hoarded it, may have lost it, realizes, and Solomon teaches that he's going to leave this life with nothing anyway in his hand. I think about those throughout the ages of time. You know what they found when they went into King Tut's tomb and saw all the gold? They saw all the gold. They saw all the riches. You know what else they found in there? They found a dead body. And his money was still there. Right? I heard of a story of a lady once in Florida who wanted to make sure that no one was going to get her Ferrari. Guess where she was buried? In her Ferrari. Guess what's in the ground right now? A dead woman and a Ferrari. You don't take it with you. You know who understands this principle? Grave robbers, right? Isn't that been a problem down through time? People are going to go rob graves because they know you're not going to take it with you. You're not going to take anything in your hand, right? It's not going to go from this life to the next. Money, it's fleeting. It has wings. It goes away, and it's not going with us. And if we spend our life in the sole pursuit, if our main purpose for being here is to fatten the bank account or make our assets huge and big, we've wasted our life, really. In fact, in the next chapter, Solomon says language something like this: better the miscarriage than to have been born and come onto the scene. If our whole purpose is just to live for money, is just to live for the fat bank account, we've wasted it. Now, since this man here has lost all of his money in this bad investment, what does his life look like now? Look, if you will, verse 17. He says, throughout his life, he also eats in darkness with great vexation, sickness, and anger. Isn't that something? You see, this fella, he tasted the rich life, didn't he? But he lost it. Let me ask you, I know some of you, this is the way that maybe you were able to work. But most people don't get to. You ever fly first class on a plane? You know, I've lost count of the number of trips I've made. Long trips overseas, Russia, Asia, Africa, blah, blah, blah. And when you're raising money for those, obviously you're not going to go ask the brethren for first class tickets, right? You just need to get there. But after a while, you put in enough miles, right? And spend enough money. There's this rare time every once in a while where you can upgrade. And you can go to first class. Now, I've had that happen 2 or 3 times. I got to tell you, it ruined me. Ruined me. Because when you get on the plane, first of all, Mr. Hockdorf, welcome. Thank you. Go left, not right, with all the peasants. Can I get you a drink, Mr. Hockdorf? Yes, I'd love an ice cold ginger ale in a real glass. You order from the menu, filet mignon. Yes. And would you mind closing the curtains? Those people are bothering me back there. And then the next leg, I've got to turn right. And what am I doing? I'm looking out of that aisle up front. I used to be up there. I've been up there before. Ruined me, right? This is what this man is facing somewhat, though, in much more severe terms. He has lost everything. And so how does he spend his life? In darkness. He's miserable. He had it all. But now he just puts himself in a dark spot, and he's so unhappy. With great vexation, his mind is reeling. He's kicking himself because he was an idiot, right? He didn't put his priorities in the right spot. He spent his money the wrong way. He blew it in his bad investment. He can't care for his family. In sickness, you ever make one of those purchases that you knew you probably shouldn't have? That buyer's remorse, we call it, where you're physically sick at your stomach after you do so. This man's ill because of what he's done. And guess what? He's angry. Just a mad, angry, miserable person. Why? Because he loved money. That's where everything was. He just loved it. Boy, it cost him. Now, you might be thinking, preacher, you talking awful bad about money, but we all got to have it. We all got to have it to live. You're exactly right. We need money to live. It's the way the world works. Always worked that way. So what do we do with this? Is Solomon saying stay away from it, or try to keep a little bit of it, and don't be rich? Is he saying it? He's not saying any of that. In fact, what I want you to notice now as we look at verses 18 through 20, as we start to bring this to a close, is in those 7 verses, okay, between verse 10 and verse 17, can you count for me how many times you see him mention God? Solomon's doing this through the whole book, setting us up, right? And then showing us what reality is. So in these 7 verses, you don't see God there. There's no balance in this person's life. He's living for the dough. He's living for the money, right? But you get to verse 18, and now he's going to show us, look, you can be rich, you can have money, but there needs to be a balance here. You need to understand that how do you handle money, how do you view money with God, okay? With God. So how is it you and I can be rich and still be right with God? This is what we learn in these couple of verses. Well, God's mentioned 4 times in these 4 verses. And so in verse 18, we find this out. This isn't difficult to understand. Here's what I've seen to be good and fitting. That word fitting, you remember when you go back to chapter 3 and verse 11, he had the word appropriate or beautiful. That's what we're reading here, that word. What I've seen to be good and beautiful. To eat, to drink. And what's the next word? Enjoy oneself in all one's labor in which he toils under the sun during the few years of the life which who has given him? God has given him. For this is his reward. So you notice what he says here? It's okay. It's good and it's appropriate and beautiful. Enjoy your food, right? Enjoy when you're able to sit down and enjoy a meal with your family. And enjoy the work that you do. God wants us to enjoy these things. You remember back again in 1 Timothy 6, verse 17, where he says about warning the rich not to put their faith in the uncertainty of money. But at the end of that verse, God gives us all things to enjoy. There's nothing wrong with us having things. There's nothing wrong with us being blessed to work. In fact, what we should do is say, thank you, God. Thank you that I get to eat and drink with my family. Thank you that I get to work, right? And he goes on and he does mention to those who are, I don't know, I guess you would say ultra wealthy, who's given riches to. You know, we've divided things in our country into classes, haven't we? And those are determined usually by money markers, if you will. We've got lower, middle, upper, and I guess we've got wowza. You know, now we've got the ultra wealthy. And are there some brethren that are this way that are really ultra wealthy? Absolutely, they are. And you may be one of them. I hope you are. This is what God has to say to those. Furthermore, as for every man to whom God has given riches and wealth. See where it came from? God gave it. So is it wrong to be rich? No, not at all. God's given the riches. God's given the wealth. What does he say? He has also empowered him to eat from them and to receive his reward and rejoice in his labor. This is the gift of God. If you're one of those folks that fall into this category of being rich and wealthy, thank God for it. He's the one that's given it to you. He's given you the power to enjoy, to be able to feed yourself. He says to have your share, right? And to rejoice in all your work. In fact, as you're going along in your work, You're pleased that you get to work. You don't grumble for the fact that you're employed and you're tired of doing it every day. You're thanking God, and you're so happy that he says at the end, verse 20, he will not often consider the years of his life. How come? Because God keeps him occupied with the gladness of his heart. He worked 30, 40, 50 years, laboring, saving, putting his stuff together. And the whole time, next thing you know, he started the job, and now it's coming to the end of his job. And the whole time he was happy. The years just flew by. God kept him occupied with the gladness of his heart. And this person, God has blessed, and he has recognized that God has given it to him, and he rejoiced through his years. That's the way we have money. So whether you have a little bit or you have a lot, rejoice. Enjoy the things that you have. It's okay to have things, right? We just need to keep them in perspective and know that they came from God and that we're here to live for his glory. But don't beat yourself up because you got a big bank account. Don't beat yourself up because your bank account may not be as big as somebody else's. Let's rejoice in that. Well, while it is the case that we're not going to take anything in our hand with us into the next life, you will take something with you, okay? And we need not forget about this. While the money and the material things will stay here, what we're going to take with us is the life that we lived, the works that we did. And you recall in 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 10, other places as well, Revelation 21, that when we depart this life, we're going to be judged by the works that follow us. So what we do here and how we live here is going to make a difference. How we view money, right? How we handle money. And those things are going to follow us. And we're going to give an answer to our Father one day on how we did those works. Whether they be good or whether they be bad, that's what Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 5 verse 10. Question is, are you ready for that? We don't know when the Lord's going to come. The Bible teaches that really plainly. And so, maybe it'll be today, maybe not. But the fact of the matter is, we need to be ready no matter when. So I hope it is the case that if you're not ready and you want to know how to get ready, we're here to help you. Michael's gonna lead us in an invitation song, and if you need help getting to heaven, we want to help you. Whether that's putting Christ on in baptism, whether it's repenting, whether it's learning how to view money properly, we want to help. And so we're going to stand, we're going to sing, and afterwards, if you'll meet one of us, one of the elders, me, anyone here, we'll be glad to sit down with you and study the Bible. So consider these things this morning as Michael leads us in a song. Won't you stand while we sing?